In the spring of 2019, something strange began happening along 3 stretches of the Illinois River. For 6 years, Dr. Marie Holloway had returned to those exact locations at the same time every year. Her team traveled the water by boat, using electrofishing surveys and hydrocaustic equipment to measure fish density. The numbers had always been so consistent they were almost predictable. But this time, the data came back scattered, inconsistent, wrong. Holloway assumed the equipment had failed. She replaced the devices. She repeated the surveys. She doubled the number of inspections and widened the sampling area. The results did not change. Fishermen noticed it too. Wade Karsten had set nets on this stretch of river for 19 years. Just the previous spring, one of his hauls had weighed nearly 900 kilograms, so much that he'd had to dump part of the catch back into the river before he could even pull the rest onto the boat. Now, his entire catch for the day was a single 62-pound blue catfish. He looked at that one fish and started laughing. It was the first time he had laughed in 6 months. The species responsible for that 900-kilogram nightmare had once forced the United States government into a containment plan worth more than $1 billion, a plan that barely slowed it down. And now, the fish were disappearing without a single additional dollar being spent. The reason traces back to a species America spent most of the 20th century actively trying to exterminate. This account draws on data from the United States Geological Survey, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources, the Invasive Carp Regional Coordinating Committee, and field records from people directly involved in the project. Dotch, the river and the mistake. The Illinois River runs 270 miles through the American Midwest, connecting the Mississippi River Basin to the system that leads straight into the Great Lakes. For generations, it has carried barges of grain, supported fishing communities, and served as one of the most important ecological corridors in the country. During the 1960s and 1970s, the United States imported 4 species of Asian carp, silver, bighead, grass, and black, into aquaculture ponds and wastewater facilities. On paper, it looked efficient. Silver carp filtered algae, grass carp ate aquatic vegetation, black carp controlled snails. It seemed like a clean, cheap solution to a set of unrelated problems. Then came the historic 1973 flood in Arkansas. Containment ponds overflowed, and the carp escaped into the Mississippi River system. By 2000, they had reached Missouri. By 2005, Iowa. By around 2010, they made up an estimated 90% of all fish biomass in parts of the Illinois River, forcing native bass, catfish, and crappie into direct competition for space and food they were losing. Silver carp brought a second, stranger problem. When they hear a boat engine, they panic and leap, sometimes several feet into the air, sometimes directly into the people riding the boat. Fish weighing several kilograms have caused concussions, broken bones, and capsized small vessels. It became one of the most viral, most feared images of the entire invasion, but the boat injuries were never the real fear. The real fear was geography. Through the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal, the Illinois River connects directly to Lake Michigan, a body of water that holds roughly a fifth of the world's fresh surface water and anchors a fishing industry worth billions of dollars a year. If silver carp and bighead carp established permanent breeding populations inside the Great Lakes, there would be no realistic way to undo it. Every model pointed to the same conclusion. Once they're in for good. What America tried. The country did not sit still. It threw money, ingenuity, and manpower at the problem in almost every direction imaginable. It turned removal into spectacle. The Redneck Fishing Tournament, founded on the Illinois River in 2006, doesn't use rods at all. Boats startle the fish into leaping, and competitors catch them in midair with nets, wearing football helmets and safety goggles because a flying 20-pound fish can genuinely knock a person unconscious. In 2010 alone, the tournament drew 105 boats, roughly 2,000 spectators, and removed over 3,000 fish in a single weekend, all of it turned into fertilizer. Illinois hired commercial fishing crews to work the river year-round. Today, those crews remove more than 1 million pounds of invasive carp annually. In 2023 alone, the number reached roughly 1.7 million pounds, over 770 metric tons pulled from the water in a single year. The state even tried to fix the fish's image. Silver carp and bighead carp are actually popular food fish in parts of Asia. White, firm-fleshed, high in protein, low in fat. The problem was branding. Carp sounds like a bottom-feeding trash fish to most Americans, and the bones are notoriously fiddly to remove. So in 2022, Illinois rebranded the fish entirely, giving it a new commercial name, *Kopi*, short for copious. Chicago restaurants started serving kopi sandwiches and smoked kopi, Some of the catch was even processed and shipped back to Asia. One Kentucky company exported roughly 40 tons of frozen fish to China in a single shipment. And then there was the big one, the electric barrier system near Romeoville, Illinois, the largest of its kind in the world. 4 barriers generate continuous electric fields strong enough to turn fish back before they reach the canal system leading to Lake Michigan. Near Joliet, the Army Corps of Engineers built the Brandon Road Defense System, layering in underwater sound, a bubble curtain, a specially engineered channel, and a high-powered flushing current. The estimated price tag for that single project, $1.15 billion. Did it work? Partially. In late 2009, silver carp DNA turned up above the barriers, including in the North Shore Channel, just miles from Lake Michigan itself. Fewer than 5% of water samples tested positive, and no live carp were ever caught in nearly 2,000 yards of deployed netting in the area. But the fact that DNA showed up above a billion-dollar barrier system at all told researchers something important. Technology alone could reduce the risk. It could not guarantee it away. The numbers nobody could explain. Then, in 2019, without a single new dollar spent on the problem, the numbers at Holloway's 3 survey sites began to drop, and kept dropping. To confirm it wasn't a fluke, Holloway turned to environmental DNA testing, a method that detects a species' presence by analyzing genetic material suspended directly in the water. If carp were still there in the same numbers, their DNA would show it, regardless of what the sonar or nets picked up. The DNA concentration was falling too. That ruled out equipment error. The actual number of fish in the river was declining. For real, at 3 separate sites, all at the same time, Holloway installed underwater cameras at all 3 locations. What those cameras captured over the following 4 months would change the way scientists thought about invasive species control in the United States. 3 native predators, species that had spent most of the 20th century in decline, overfished, blocked by dams, or in one case, deliberately killed by wildlife agencies, were quietly making a comeback, and they were accomplishing something that helicopters, electric barriers, and million-dollar bounty programs had never fully managed. The fish America tried to erase. The most important discovery on those cameras was a species most Americans had spent decades being taught to fear and kill on sight, the alligator gar. Its lineage stretches back more than 150 million years, a living relic older than most of the dinosaurs people find in museums today. A full-grown adult can exceed 2.4 meters in length and weigh more than 135 kilograms. The American record catch weighed nearly 148 kilograms. Its body is covered in hard, diamond-shaped ganoid scales, essentially natural armor, and its modified swim bladder lets it gulp air directly from the surface, allowing it to survive in oxygen-poor water where almost nothing else can. For most of the 20th century, the alligator gar was treated as vermin. In Texas, wildlife officials didn't just tolerate its decline. They actively used electricity to kill the species outright, convinced it was devastating populations of bass and other sport fish. Combined with dam construction blocking spawning migration and decades of unregulated fishing, alligator gar disappeared from Illinois waters entirely by the 1960s. Gone. Erased from a state where it had lived for millions of years, based on a belief that turned out to be almost entirely wrong. Later research told a very different story. When scientists actually studied what alligator gar eat, they found the diet is dominated by shad, buffalo fish, freshwater drum, and, as it turns out, carp. Bass and other sport fish make up only a small fraction of what they actually hunt. There was never solid evidence that alligator gar were the threat to sport fishing that Texas officials assumed. The species had been punished for a crime it hadn't committed. Starting in 2010, biologists began quietly trying to undo that mistake. Using broodstock collected from the lower Mississippi River, hatcheries raised young alligator gar and released them into the same waters their ancestors had vanished from generations earlier. Between 2010 and 2025, more than 21,000 alligator gar were tagged, tracked, and released across dozens of water bodies in Illinois. Year after year, the giants began returning to a river that had, in every practical sense, forgotten them. Here's what makes the gar so effective against carp specifically. Unlike a catfish, which hunts largely by scent and swallows prey whole, the alligator gar is a patient ambush predator. It hangs almost motionless just beneath the surface, drifting closer without disturbing the water, and then snaps shut, a broad jaw lined with 2 full rows of teeth around anything unlucky enough to pass by. Silver carp and bighead carp evolved in Asia, alongside a completely different community of predators. They have no evolutionary memory of a threat like this, something enormous, silent and armored, rising from directly below them. By the time a carp registers the danger, it's already over. # the support cast. The gar didn't do this alone. Two other native species were working different parts of the same river at the same time. Blue catfish, native to the Mississippi, Missouri, and Ohio River basins, patrol the water column itself, using the sensory barbels around their mouths to hunt in murky water where sight is nearly useless. In a study of 65 adult blue catfish collected near Alton, Illinois, researchers found silver carp in nearly 70% of stomachs that contained food, making up more than half of everything those fish had eaten by weight. If you've ever cleaned a 60-pound blue catfish, you know the moment. You open the abdominal cavity expecting crayfish or shad, and instead find 2, sometimes 3, partially digested juvenile silver carp lying stacked inside. There's a wrinkle here worth being honest about. Some of the carp recovered from catfish stomachs were larger than what the fish could realistically have swallowed alive, which suggests blue catfish are scavenging injured or dead carp, at least as often as they're actively hunting them. Either way, they're removing biomass from the river that would otherwise keep growing. Then there's the bowfin, another living fossil, with a lineage of its own stretching back roughly 150 million years, hiding in the stagnant backwaters and oxygen-poor shallows where few other fish can survive. Like the gar, it uses its swim bladder as a kind of primitive lung. For decades, anglers dismissed bowfin as a trash fish too, believing, again, largely without evidence, that it was destroying sport fish populations. In reality, bowfin mostly eat whatever small fish happen to be most abundant in their habitat. In waters now filling up with juvenile carp, that means bowfin have simply added the invader to their existing diet, quietly thinning out the next generation before it ever gets large enough to matter. 3 predators, 3 different dips, 3 different stages of the carp life cycle. Bowfin picking off larvae in still backwaters, blue catfish hunting juveniles in the open water column, alligator gar taking down fully grown adults near the surface. Together, they form a kind of predation pressure that the carp, despite laying up to 5 million eggs per female per season, never evolved a defense against, because nothing quite like this 3-tiered attack existed where they came from. # a parallel story, half a world away. This pattern isn't unique to Illinois, and that matters because it tells us this isn't a fluke. It's a recurring principle. On the other side of the planet, common carp have overrun huge sections of Australia's Murray-Darling Basin. In some locations, they make up nearly the entire fish biomass of the river. And yet, beneath that water, there's still a native predator large enough to fight back. The Murray cod, the apex predator of Australia's inland river systems, capable of growing past 1.8 meters and 100 kilograms. In the early 2000s, researchers examined the stomach contents of 39 Murray cod caught by anglers in the lower Murray River. About 35%, roughly 14 fish, had carp in their stomachs. Every single Murray cod that had eaten a carp was longer than 500 millimeters, confirming that size, not just appetite, determines whether a native predator can actually take down an invasive one. 2 continents, 2 completely unrelated carp invasions, 2 native predators, one ancient and armored, one simply enormous, quietly stepping into the same role. That's not coincidence. That's what happens when an invasive species runs into a native ecosystem old enough and intact enough to still have its own heavyweight defenders. # where the real progress is. None of this means the Illinois River has solved its carp problem. It hasn't. In the lower stretches of the river, carp densities remain extremely high, and adult carp that outgrow their predators face very little natural pressure at all. But near the front line, the stretch closest to Lake Michigan, the one that actually matters for protecting the Great Lakes, the numbers tell a real story. After more than a decade of combined effort, the Illinois Department of Natural Resources reported that carp density at Starved Rock, Marseille, and Dresden Island had fallen by nearly 95%. That drop didn't come from one single hero. It came from stacking every available layer on top of each other. Commercial crews removing well over 1 million pounds of carp a year. Dams and navigation locks slowing the fish's northward movement. Electric barriers holding the final line near. The canal system, environmental DNA monitoring, catching any stragglers that slip through. And, running underneath all of it, 3 native predators finally being allowed, for the first time in decades, to do the job people had spent most of the 20th century actively preventing them from doing. USGS models suggest that reducing the number of fish moving upstream from the lower river, combined with intercepting whatever reaches the front line, can meaningfully shrink the population, pushing toward the lake. Predation from bass, catfish, gar, and bowfin adds pressure on top of that. But researchers are careful to note there's still no hard evidence proving predator recovery was the main driver of the decline. It's one strong piece of a much larger, messier picture. What it actually means. Here's the detail that should stop you for a second. The species now doing some of the heaviest lifting against a billion-dollar invasive fish problem is the exact species Texas wildlife officials once electrocuted on purpose, convinced it was the enemy. For 60 years, the alligator gar was treated as something to be removed from American rivers. It took until 2010 for anyone to seriously try putting it back, and within less than a decade of large-scale reintroduction, it was already showing up as a documented predator of one of the most expensive invasive species the United States has ever dealt with. The lesson isn't that nature quietly fixes every mistake humans make. The Illinois River still needs its electric barriers, its commercial fishing crews, its constant DNA monitoring. None of that goes away. The lesson is narrower, and in some ways more uncomfortable. Sometimes the threat wildlife managers spent decades trying to eliminate wasn't actually the threat at all. Sometimes it was the answer, sitting at the bottom of the river the entire time, waiting to be allowed back in. So here's the real question. How many other native predators have we spent decades treating as the enemy, persecuting, poisoning, electrocuting, driving out of entire states, when they might have been exactly what we needed the whole time? Tell me what you think in the comments, and subscribe for the next story of nature quietly undoing our biggest mistake.